365 Fly Fishing Tips for Trout, Bass, and Panfish by Skip Morris. Tip number 124. Fly casting is about the wrist and mostly about not bending it.
So anytime you're going to cast, I don't care whether you got a fly on there or not, you can still snap a tippet and hurt yourself, hurt your eyes. So you need glasses. It can be prescription glasses, sunglasses. These are what you call shop safety glasses, and they're quite inexpensive. They're not particularly attractive, but they will protect your eyeballs. So it is natural to bend your wrist. When you throw a stick, perfect example. It's kind of like a rod, not really, but kind of. It's long. You're going to rear back, you're going to bend your wrist, come through, and throw the stick, right? A lot of wrist bending going on there. The opposite of what you want with a fly rod. But if you threw a stick like this with the wrist locked in place, you wouldn't throw it very far. So you're going to go like that. Natural. So, just a couple of weeks ago, I taught a morning class at a big fly fishing show, and I had a bunch of students, and in a half hour I was able to get them all making a good fly cast. Now there were a number of things that I did, and I worked with every person, but the main thing that I did that made the biggest difference is I got them all to lock their wrist. What I did actually was I reached around with their permission behind them, and then I grabbed their wrist and the rod. And some of them were pretty strong, actually, and that your instinct is to bend your wrist. So, but I've got a good grip, so from all my fly casting, and so I was able to hold the rod. But they looked, well, they didn't look good, and then all of a sudden they looked very good. They really looked good, all because of this. That's how important it is to lock your wrist, not to do this, but to do this. It makes a huge difference. Now, I've got this conventional rod with a conventional butt on the reel seat because I wanted to show you something. Here's how important locking your wrist is when you're new to fly casting, even if you're fairly experienced at it. This is a tool that is made, it's got Velcro and leather, and it is made to slip over the butt of your rod, and then by yourself, which is a plus, you can attach it to your hand. So you just bring it over your, that's the wrong hand, bring it over your wrist and then pull this side up and attach the Velcro, and now, lo and behold, the rod, your wrist is locked. You really can't bend it very much. So you have to keep your wrist locked, and then all of a sudden you're casting really well. This is a good solution. I'll show you a really simple solution that works quite well. And that's the right one. Get my shirt cuff out here. A stretchy sweater cuff won't do, but a shirt cuff will. And so I put the butt of the rod, I slip it into the shirt cuff, and then when I try to bend my wrist, at least in this direction, the shirt cuff stops me. Well, either direction really, because my forearm stops me the other way, but this actually works quite well. And if you just be a little careful, because you don't want to be popping your cuff button off all the time, but this reminds you and also forces you to lock your wrist. So again, the wrist is locked. There's a third solution, and that is to take some cord or string and tie, it's a ratty one, tie an overhand knot in it, and then tie that knot around the butt of the rod. Just pull it firm. Then drape the ends over the rod, and then spend the next half hour trying to tie a bow all by yourself. Or better yet, much better, much wiser, Carol, would you do me a big favor? Oh, look at that smiling woman. You're such a fine spouse. See, that's much better use of your time. That didn't take long. So here we have again the locked wrist. And just from a piece of string or cord. And then when you're done, the person who tied this can leave. You can just grab one end of the bow and pop it loose. Now, I got to tell you, you're going to read or hear about bending the wrist as part of casting. When you get really comfortable with locking your wrist, and believe me, that takes some time. A lot of people get this down pretty well, and then you take a look at them 6 months later, they're bending their wrist like crazy because it's natural. So don't be hard on yourself, but just remember, you're going to fall naturally back into bending your wrist. So this is why all this stuff really helps, and to keep going back and checking. But the point I was making is there are ways to cast that involve bending the wrist. These involve very little wrist, and it has to be used briefly at exactly the right time. It has to be timed very accurately. Don't even think about those things until you are comfortable and consistently locking your wrist as you cast. Once you get that down, then you can start looking into a little bit of wrist bending, but not until then. So let's see what actually happens when the wrist is bent. This is it. Make a normal casting stroke, but see the line is hitting the ground behind me and in front of me, and it's not going out very far either. On every back cast, the fly is going to get caught in something. And there it is. There's that ill-behaving wrist flopping around. Now let's make that wrist rigid. Just lock it up. And now watch what happens. Same stroke with the arm. Everything's the same, but the wrist is locked. And now the line is going out. The loop is rolling down the line. The fly's getting delivered out there. And the fly isn't getting stuck.
That was tip 124 from 365 Fly Fishing Tips for Trout, Bass, and Panfish by Skip Morris.
From 365 Fly Fishing Tips for Trout, Bass, and Panfish by Skip Morris. Something like that, a little more punch.
I'm depressed, and you're having me do this?
I knew you'd say that. Let's see what happens.
Okay, the collar's messed up. Get your chin down. Put your hat back just a little bit. Stop it!
Well, did you fix it?
Well, you didn't let me.
Well, no, come here, fix it.
Yeah, no, it's fixed.
Well, you attacked me.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
No, you attacked me. Come on. Now get your chin down.
Well, I don't have to have it down now.
Yeah, you do.
Go back there.
Okay. Now behave yourself.
Okay,
Okay, this is
that's crooked.
this is
Head, it's my head. Do that.
this is a tip.
Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Whoever it is, I hope they're okay. They sound very ill. Okay.